There are as many levels of consciousness as there are consciousnesses, and that's a lot. But one way to simplify it, categorize it, is to break it down into 3 levels. The first, the most basic, the most self-centered and subjective, we'll say, is the level of materialism and survival. So this is where this interesting paradox of the ego and of being human takes place, because we're the only animals that have egos. But if we're merely living in accordance with our own survival, which is what other species do, then we're simply living from ego. So it's up to us to acknowledge that we're not just egos. We can't just dissolve the ego. That's a move that the ego wants to make when it's in a state of pseudo-spirituality. We'll say that the ego wants to get rid of itself. But you can't do that. It's a part of us, just like our bodies are parts of us, yet we're not merely material. Okay? So what we have to do is acknowledge that part of ourselves that only wants to acknowledge ourselves. If that makes sense. The part of ourselves that at least has potential to only be self-concerned. That's the ego. That's what it means to be in a state where our own survival in the physical is our primary concern and of primary importance. It's our highest value, in a sense. So that's what it means to be a materialist. Right, is to believe that the highest good is material survival, which equates essentially to the avoidance of death, physical death. Now, you have to let that part of you die to get to the next level. All right, so we have the survival paradigm. That's the paradigm of ego. We climb one massive level whenever we acknowledge that part of ourselves that only cares about ourselves. And then we enter the realm of reason and integrity. This is the realm where language and logic have something to say. We can explain things. Things make sense or they don't make sense to us. Now, when they don't make sense, maybe it's a matter of something not fitting right with the rest of reality. That's what falsehood is. Maybe it's a matter of that being beyond the mind, beyond the intellect, beyond the ability of reason, logic, language to explain things. That takes us into the higher paradigm, which is the spiritual paradigm. It's where logic and language become tools for serving the greater good, the greater truth with a capital T. All right, this is where logic ceases to not explain just anything, but it ceases to be able to give a full account of the truth of something. That the truth of something is greater than our ability to explain it. That's what it means to be in the spiritual paradigm. Now, if something makes sense, if it is true, we can explain it, just not fully. Because the truth of it depends, or our comprehension of it depends on our being it. Not necessarily experience in the physical sense, but experience in the sense of being present, being one with something. And being a vessel for its existence, which takes us out of the ego and out of the intellect's compulsion to prove itself right. So once we enter the spiritual paradigm, competition falls away. It ceases in importance. Language and logic become tools for serving the greater good and the greater truth. but they themselves are not God. They're at risk of that in that middle level of reason and integrity. Mind you, about 80% of people, 80 to 85%, are in the survival paradigm. Essentially, they're ego-driven beings which are only concerned with their own survival. So they're materialists. They don't really understand, are not even interested in attempting to comprehend that truth actually exists. That there are things that are true outside of the realm of their ability to comprehend within the context of their own survival needs and desires. So there's a lot of fear there. There's a lot of pride there. Basically, this is where you get the 7 deadly sins. 7 deadly sins all represent a different part of the ego when it's expressed as a mere survival being on the whole, right? There's an intellectual way to understand why that's wrong. That's where religion comes in. That's where objective moral inquiry comes in to play. But you're not truly spiritual until you've even transcended that. Transcended the compulsion to explain things, to be right, to put yourselves on a higher moral ground than your neighbor. Right? So once you enter the spiritual paradigm, you can certainly distinguish good from evil with a high degree of accuracy once you get out of this compulsion to explain things. But you also see the goodness of God and nature playing out in every single aspect of reality that you can possibly observe. So even that evil person, the person who has malicious intent, or that event that has no explanation for why it happened, it's just so horrible, it caused so much grief and pain in so many people. Even that has purpose in the spiritual paradigm of reality. It makes sense because you see God playing out through nature and providing very clear conclusions for the previous processes of nature. That there is an inherent meaning in all things, all beings, all events. Always. And it's not other people, it's not events, it's not things, it's not potentialities that we fear. It's our inability to cope with the emotions that arise about those things that we actually have a problem with. So spiritual growth always comes back to self-accountability, to realizing your own inner authority, and to dealing with yourself over and over again, all day, every day. Because that's actually how you solve problems out there, is by being present and still in here, in the mind, in the heart, in the soul, being grounded in your own center of authority as an expression of God's authority. That's what it means to be spiritual. Doesn't matter how you label it, what kind of rituals you practice. Doesn't matter what kind of community you're a part of or not a part of, or what beliefs you have in particular. This is what matters. Your centeredness in your own authority as an expression of God's authority. The authority of truth with a capital T, goodness with a capital G. That's all that matters. All right. That's all I've got for now. 3 levels of consciousness, if that makes sense. Cheers.